Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and GameStop needs to do better. Shooting this from my car right now because I just picked up the mail because I was expecting a package from GameStop, and I'm going to talk about that real quick because GameStop made a blunder that I think, depending on what side of the coin you fall on, could be very, very bad for customers. But in this case, it actually worked out in my favor. Now, I've got some crackers and some juice in my car, so yes, I like to travel with some crackers. That's neither here nor there. Let me get to the point of the video. So I ordered a copy of Batman Return of the Joker on the original Game Boy from GameStop's website. And I ordered it because I had actually gone to a GameStop near me and picked up a copy of Batman Return of the Joker for the NES. Unfortunately, the copy that I picked up did not work, and so I wound up having to return it. But I was kind of okay with it because in my mind I was like, you know what, well, at least I have Return of the Joker on the original Game Boy. Now, if you've ever played both of those games, you know they're nothing alike. They play nothing alike. The original or the Batman Return of the Joker on the NES, that Batman has more of he uses more of like a projectile weapon. The platforming is a little bit more stiff on that one. It's a very stiff platformer with Batman using primarily a variety of projectile weapons to, kind of make his way through the levels. So that's how the NES version of Batman Return of the Joker plays. Batman Return of the Joker for the original Game Boy, however, plays a little bit different, not a lot differently. For one, I think the Batman Return of the Joker on the original Game Boy, I feel like the platforming on that game is way better than the NES version for a number of reasons. One, you can wall jump in Batman Return of the Joker for the Game Boy. Now, I'm not sure if you can do it in the NES version because I don't remember doing it in the NES version. You guys can let me know down in the comments if that's something that you can do in Return of the Joker on the NES version of Batman Return of the Joker. But I know on the one for the original Game Boy, the wall jumping feels a lot more satisfying, as well as the platforming is pretty good. The only issue I have with Batman Return of the Joker on the Game Boy is that Batman seems to take like an extra half a step after you release the directional button. So if you're running right and you release the directional button, Batman's going to take like a little half step extra from what you're doing. So you almost have to time when you start and stop your running movements in Batman Return of the Joker for the original Game Boy. But both games are great games. Both games are fun to play. Both are games that, I myself want to have in my collection. I had them both in my original collection, and they were great to have. But when I sold my collection, I lost them both, and so now I'm working to actually build my collection back up and get those games back into the collection. But now on to the blunder. So I went on GameStop's website and I saw that they had Batman Return of the Joker for the original Game Boy, and I was like, you know what? This is great. I can order it again. They had it on their website for like $17.99. When you factor in the GameStop discount or whatever the case may be, that kind of knocks that price down to something like I want to say, roughly like $17, like $17.09 or something really insignificant like that. And so I went ahead and I purchased it, and it said that it was delivered. So when it was delivered today, I went to my mailbox and picked up the games, expecting to see Batman Return of the Joker for the Game Boy. And instead, I got Batman Return of the Joker for the NES. And that's hilarious because I literally just returned this game back to GameStop because the one that I bought in store didn't work. Now, for those of you who are like, you're making it up, no, you didn't. Here it is right here. So this was the slip that they packed in with the game, right? So whoever processed this game must have processed it incorrectly. they processed it, I guess, as the Game Boy version when it in fact was the the NES version. Now, for those of you who know, or if you don't know, there is a very big price difference between, not a very big, but there is a significant price difference between these two games. Now, Batman Return of the Joker on the Game Boy, if you were to try to buy it on eBay, it's probably a $30 game on average. Maybe you could find it for a little bit cheaper. Maybe you could find it for $5 less. Maybe you'd have to find it for $5 more. But I want to say it falls somewhere between the 27 and 35-ish, zone. I've seen copies of the Game Boy version go for $40, like if it's super clean. But I want to say on average, it's like a $30 game. However, Batman Return of the Joker for the NES is more. Now, the game, when I first got Batman Return of the Joker a few years ago, it was like going for, I want to say in the 60s, maybe 70s. But now for some reason, Batman Return of the Joker for the NES is like in the 80s to 90s. I'm even seeing a lot of copies of this game go for 100, if not over 100. And so that's a significant price difference, right? We're talking, from $17 to, a game that is roughly $100 in value. Now, in this case, for me, this is actually a pretty good thing because I got another copy of Batman Return of the Joker for the NES. The only thing I have to do now is go home and make sure that it works. But if it works, then that's great because I essentially got a copy of Batman Return of the Joker for $17. Which I'm never going to be mad at that, right? However, on the flip side of that coin, what does this mean for the person who now goes to GameStop's website ordering a copy of Batman Return of the Joker on the NES, and instead they get Batman Return of the Joker on the Game Boy, right? So they're going to be a very upset person. They're going to be a very upset customer, and they're ultimately going to wind up returning it. And hopefully GameStop doesn't give them a hard time with the return. But GameStop typically, what I've seen is that it seems like they're starting to try and clamp down on returns. And it seems like, some of this, not all the stores operate the same, and not all of the employees have the same information. I recently saw a video from the dude Memory Card. I think that's the name of his channel. He has a channel named Memory Card, and he's trying to use GameStop to rebuild his retro collection. And I think he bought like 6 games, and like 2 of them came complete in box, and the other 4 came disc only. And so when he went back to GameStop to return the games, at first the guy tried to give him a hard time, and then after giving him a hard time, he basically refunded all the games, and the dude got paid to actually buy the games. So there goes another like classic example of a GameStop fumble, right? Like, not only were they giving him a hard time to return the games at first, but then like they did a complete fumble in the other direction and gave him 2 games for free. So there's definitely some logistical and infrastructure work that needs to be done on GameStop's part when it comes to how they're running this retro thing. I think they're still getting it wrong logistically in a lot of ways, and I think a lot of that is due in part to lack of knowledge of the product and lack of knowledge of the process. Like both their internal employees, like the people that you call over the phone, the people processing these games from the warehouses, they don't know what these games are. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to recognize a Game Boy game from an NES game, from a Genesis game, from a N64 game. They just don't know. So there's the product knowledge gap, which I would think at this point, honestly, with GameStop having done retro this long, when did they launch retro again? What, like 2023, 2024? It's been a few years now that they've been doing this retro thing, and I would have thought that they would have gotten a better handle on how they run this part of their business, especially when a lot of these retro games are coming in more expensive than like your average like PlayStation 4 or even Switch game, with some of these games being pretty expensive. So I think there's a product knowledge gap, and I also think that there's a process knowledge gap, and it's very apparent. It's very apparent when you see things like folks in store doing complete refunds on all the games and giving people games for free, or giving people a hard time about a process that GameStop, has on their website, or a process that GameStop gives customers. If part of GameStop's return process is you being able to process the return online and print out a return slip and take it to the store, the person at the store shouldn't be giving you a hard time about the return slip. That to me just shows a gap in process knowledge. And so when you combine a lack of product knowledge with a lack of process knowledge, you get situations like this, where I now have a $100 NES game for $17. And again, this could have been the other extreme, where I pay, $100 and get a $17 game, and now I'm really mad. So I guess this video is really just to say, GameStop, get it together. I personally don't think that, I think when I look at how many stores are being shut down, and when I look at what's happening with AI, and when I look at what's happening in the job market, I don't know how much longer there are going to be any GameStop stores floating around, right? Like, the end of GameStop may be near altogether as far as brick and mortar goes, who knows? But while it's still available, and while I can still utilize them for retro games, I'm gonna continue to use them for retro games. I'm not making this video to say I'm never gonna shop at GameStop again. I'm just making this video to say that they're still making these massive blunders, and sometimes it'll work in your favor, sometimes it'll work against you, but this stuff is still happening, and hopefully they can figure it out. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you've had any kind of experiences like this with GameStop lately, and I'll catch you in the next one. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.